All right, everybody. So today is Tuesday, November 9th. This is our regular meeting of the Springfield City Council's COVID-19 Response Committee. I'm City Councilor Jesse Letterman, chairman of the committee. We're joined by my colleague, at-large City Councilor Justin Hurst, and we're also joined today by the Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Helen Colton-Harris, as well as our guest for today, Dr. Whitcop from Bay State Medical Center. We appreciate you being with us, Doctor. Thank you so much for taking the time to attend, and of course to our Commissioner, who is always with us. What we thought we'd do today is begin with our normal update, but a bit accelerated with Commissioner Colton-Harris, the current state in the city of Springfield relative to the pandemic, and then move swiftly to Dr. Whitcop to share a little bit of information with us about the status of pediatric vaccinations and what the community should be aware of with regard to that. So Commissioner, thank you so much for being here. And as usual, I'll turn it over to you to let us know what is going on currently in the city. I know I just saw a recent article about a small uptick, so we'll hand the floor over to you at this time, and also to share anything you would like to share about pediatric vaccines as well as booster shots in the community.
Thank you very much, Councilor Letterman. I appreciate your inviting me once again, and I'm myself very anxious to hear Dr. Whitcop's presentation and information, as I know it will be valuable not only to the City Council, but also to the Board of Health or the Department of Health and Human Services. As you indicated, there was an uptick in our cases last week. 259 was the number that we had this week. Last week, as you recall, it was 214. We are seeing that increase. Where is that increase that we're noticing in our data? 126 of those cases were under the age of 20 years old. And so we still in the city experience cases under the age of 30 that really are concerning. I had a conversation with Springfield Public Schools today. They are also seeing an uptick in the cases in the public schools. Obviously, we do know that the mask mandate is in place still for Springfield Public Schools, but they are experiencing an uptick, and we continue to do the contact tracing around that just to follow up. As far as vaccines are concerned, 52% of our residents are fully vaccinated. 60% have had one dose. Today, we had a vaccine clinic at St. John's Congregational Church. Also had a meeting with VaxForce today, who is the advisory group that helps make decisions along with the Public Health Council. So we, again, that's primarily it. Our vaccine clinics will be held every Tuesday and Thursday at St. John's Congregational Church. On Tuesday, it'll be 9 to 12. On Thursday, it'll be 4 to 7. You might recall we cannot use the public. In the past, we've used Springfield Public Schools. We've used the senior centers. Because they are back open, we don't have that as an option at this point, which is why we are going to move our vaccination clinics in those neighborhoods where we see that there is a lower rate of vaccine compliance. So we'll be at St. John's for the month of November, potentially December, depending on our outreach efforts. Also, I think you are aware that Technology Park is doing vaccinations, as well as Curative is still at Eastville Mall doing vaccinations. CVS, Big Y, Stop and Shop, BHN, Bay State, Trinity. There are lots of options for our residents for boosters and vaccinations. The options were not there when we began this journey. If you recall, it was only the Board of Health that had the opportunity to vaccinate early in the pandemic, and that is so decentralized right now, which is a good thing. So there are lots of options for our residents. We will not initially be doing the 5 to 11-year-olds. Currently, we're going to focus on doing the boosters for that population that we did vaccinate early on. And so we'll continue to do that work. So the 5 to 7-year-olds, there are clinics available. We're also, and that's why I'm glad Dr. Witkoff is on, we are also recommending that our youth between the ages of 5 and 11 and parents do reach out to their pediatricians if they have questions, concerns. That is a trusted voice for our parents as well as our pediatric population. So it is our recommendation that pediatrics and pediatricians be involved in the recommendations as well for the 5 to 7-year-old age group. And I know we're going to condense this, so I'll stop there and see if there's anything I can update on.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. We're also joined by Ward 3 City Councilor Melvin Edwards. So Councilor Hurst, Councilor Edwards, if you have a question for the Commissioner specifically, this would be the time to ask it. And Commissioner, the question I had around the boosters was, I know the guidance has changed a little bit over time. At this time, who is recommended to be receiving boosters? Who should be thinking about that at this time?
Well, the primary group obviously are those immune compromised, as well as individuals over the age of 65. But we are not going to turn away anyone who is requesting a booster, because we are not specifically asking their health status indices. And so it's going to be our strategies if someone 18 and over who presents as having, as feeling as though they are eligible based on health status, we will vaccinate them. But you are absolutely correct. There is a criteria for a specific age group, and that age group obviously is 65 and over, individuals with chronic healthcare conditions, immune compromised individuals. But again, we vaccinated individuals today who presented with, who's told us they had a chronic disease or needed to be vaccinated. And we are not asking for proof. We are administering the doses.
And this is across the board, regardless of whether you receive Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, or Pfizer, you can still receive a booster.
Well, Johnson & Johnson's, I know Tapestry is only using Johnson & Johnson. We are at this moment only using Moderna. So we do not have Pfizer. We do have J&J, but we are at this point focusing on Moderna. Pfizer is at Technology Park. Pfizer is at most of the pharmacies that I talked to you about. Pfizer is there as well, but our boosters are going to be Moderna at this point.
And I'd seen some conflicting reports on whether you should stick with the brand that you initially received. Do we have guidance on that at this point?
We do. The CDC has indicated that mixing is fine. That's what the CDC is giving us for guidance. We did have individuals today who got Pfizer, who we gave Moderna to. We are telling individuals, it might be based on adverse reactions and what they experienced during those first 2 doses, it might be wise to stay with the same vaccine that you had initially. But the recommendation from the CDC is that you can mix the vaccines.
Okay. Thank you so much, Commissioner. Councilor Hurst or Councilor Edwards, any questions for the Commissioner?
Commissioner, can you hear me, Councilor, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I didn't quite get an update, and I don't know whose fault this might have been, with respect to the number of hospitalizations, as well as those in critical care. Do you present that information, or does that come from Bay State and Mercy?
It comes from Bay State and Mercy. So when you read that, the reporter has directly reached out to Bay State Health because that number changes and I don't always know what it is. That's the preferred method of communication.
Got it. Thank you, Peter. I'm hoping that the next article you write, Peter, you'll be able to include that if you can access that information. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Hurst. And seeing none, Commissioner, the only other question I had was I saw a report today that stated a less than 1% positivity rate across public schools in Massachusetts. But do we know how that squares with the data we're seeing in Springfield public schools?
I can tell you that it's higher. As I said, I had a meeting with Jeannie Clancy today, along with the individuals who work with her. And she is reporting to me some troubling numbers based on, she's not, the case rate is not going down. Let me just say that. But so she did report some uptick as far as Springfield Public Schools is concerned. That 1%, I do not believe, and you certainly can reach out to Springfield Public School, that does not reflect what we're seeing in the city of Springfield.
All right, we will reach out for those numbers through Nurse Clancy and have them sent out to the counselors. And
I think they will be reporting that at the school committee meetings, just which is usually the forum she uses to update the residents.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much, Commissioner. If there's no further questions for the Commissioner at this time, then we will move to our guest, who is Dr. Crystal Whitcop. Dr. Whitcop, thank you so much for being with us, and we always appreciate the assistance of Mr. Knappich, who was able to help us secure your attendance at the meeting today. Would you like to introduce yourself and your role at Bay State first and foremost?
Sure. So I'm Dr. Crystal Whitcop. I am the medical director at Bay State General Pediatrics, which cares for about 10,000 of the children in Springfield. So a large portion.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for being with us and for all that you do every day, and especially in the last 2 years. And so our purpose in reaching out was we were hopeful that as we see the FDA having released authorization for pediatric patients and children to receive the COVID-19 vaccine, we certainly know we're going to see an uptick in questions from our constituents about that process, about the approval process, about whether they should get their children vaccinated, possible side effects, and the benefits. And we were wondering if you might be able to provide to us just your thoughts on it and what you're seeing in terms of the city of Springfield right now in your practice.
Sure. So the approval came through last week for the 5 to 11-year-old dosing for Pfizer vaccine only for that age group. That approval was based on a couple clinical trials. They had done a phase 1 and a phase 2 trial to determine the appropriate dose for kids. And the dose that they came up with is actually a third of the dose that we give adults. So right now for adults, we give them 30 micrograms of Pfizer for the first dose, as well as then the second dose 3 weeks apart. When they did the dosing escalation trials in children, they found that a 10 microgram dose got as good of antibody response as that 30 microgram dose. So that's the dose that they decided to go with for what was the phase 3 trial, which was the clinical trial. So in that trial, they had about 2,400 children enrolled. They did a 2-to-1, which meant that 1,500 got vaccine and 750 didn't. So arguably smallish numbers, but the results looked so very similar to what we saw both in kids and adults that they decided to go ahead with those numbers, meaning the efficacy was about 91%. So in about 91% of cases, it prevented COVID infection, which was similar to the adult data. And the side effect profile looked very similar. They weren't seeing anything come out in terms of side effects that we hadn't either seen in the adolescent trials or the adult trials. So they felt comfortable moving forward. When the FDA and the CDC gave the approval, however, they are asking for additional safety information. So they're asking for about another 20,000 kids to be tracked. for any additional side effects that they might not have been able to pick up because of the numbers that were in the original trial.
And what types of questions have you been getting from parents and patients in regards to this?
So mainly about side effects. So they want to know, are their kids at risk for anything that we're not thinking of? And one of the things that's really interesting about Pfizer and Moderna is consensus of the mRNA vaccination. So the way mRNA vaccines work is they introduce a puzzle piece into our body, for lack of a better word. And that puzzle asks our body to actually encode for a protein that looks similar to COVID. So there is no COVID in these vaccines at all, in the Pfizer and the Moderna. There's just a messenger that's telling us for our body to produce something that looks like COVID, which then we can respond to. Parents seem reassured by that because everyone's worried that we're actually injecting some piece of COVID in with Pfizer, which we're not. And then they want to know, they ask about certainly the heart inflammation, because that's been in the news a lot in terms of young men, in particular ages around 16 to 19, that seem to have an increased risk of having some mild cardiac inflammation from the vaccine. That's been looked at a lot at this point, and it's really been shown that the risk of that is much, much less than the risk of heart inflammation if you get COVID, and that it seems to be pretty limited, that rare side effect, to young men. Other age groups don't seem to get it. When we look at the kids 12 to 16-year-olds, they don't seem to be getting it. So I'm pretty comfortable saying to parents that we don't think this should be an issue in the 5 to 11-year-olds based on what we know. But it'll be something that we'll be tracking for. So they want to know how long the kids will be sick for, which seems similar. So they seem to get sore arms like the adults. They seem to have some increased chance of having flu-like illness the next day that lasts a short time period. But other than that, there's nothing special that's coming out that seems different.
Thank you. And throughout the pandemic, I know, there's been sort of a lot of questions about how COVID impacts children versus adults. Can you talk a little bit to that and what risk level exists for children, in their unvaccinated state?
So a couple big risks. So the first risk that we are seeing a lot in PD is just the mental health crisis from children being isolated and having to think about COVID. So as we get vaccinated as a population and decreasing that social isolation for them and getting them back in school consistently, we know that those mental health issues should improve. So that's just an overlying risk of COVID in the general population. For kids in particular, we're seeing increased risk of hospitalization and serious disease with the Delta variant. We had some questions early on whether or not that was true, but it certainly seems at this point we have the data to say that over the last 6 months, we've seen a pretty large uptick in children hospitalizations from COVID. About 24 out of every 100,000 children in the US have been hospitalized with COVID at this point. Of children who get COVID, 1 in 3,000 of them seem to develop what's called MIS-C, which is the inflammation. So the overall sort of body multi-system inflammation that can make them really sick. We've had about 160 children die of COVID so far, most of them in the last 6 months. On an average flu year, we get about 112 deaths from flu for children. So
is that nationally?
That's nationally, yeah. So 160 deaths nationally. And as I said, usually we have about 112 deaths nationally across, but the hospitalization rate is definitely increasing. Our MIS-C is definitely increasing. Overall, just disease burden. Children also get long haul COVID, just like adults do. So we have, I know personally in this practice, we have many children who have some long haul symptoms that they've been suffering with.
All right. Thank you so much.
In terms of, we also know, just like in adults, right, all of those things impact our populations of color and health disparities populations greater than whites or people who are higher socioeconomic status. So.
Councilor Edwards or Councilor Hurst, did either of you have a question for Dr. Whitcop about pediatric vaccine authorization? Or
just a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Councilor Hurst, go ahead.
Do we know when the Moderna vaccine for children 5 to 11 is expected? And would you recommend holding parents hold out for the Moderna vaccine over the Pfizer? Or would you just say, just go ahead and get the Pfizer right now?
Yes, I would definitely say just go ahead and get the Pfizer. Moderna has not submitted anything thus far from their phase 3 clinical trials. So I don't know when that will be. They haven't submitted anything for the 12 to 18-year-old age group, which I expect that will be first for them. And then they'll move on to the 5 to 11s. So we don't know when that approval will come. I imagine it will come someday, but when that is, I don't know. So absolutely, you should be getting the Pfizer. It's interesting, we have a lot of questions about boosters, and so that sort of gets to that question as well. And I don't know if children will need boosters or not, to be honest with you, or at least as many boosters as adults. One of the things about children that's great and wonderful, one of the reasons we immunize in childhood is because our children are able to mount a much more robust antibody response than as we get older and our cells age. So my antibody response is much less than my daughter's, who's 18 when she gets her COVID vaccine. That's probably why we can give children a smaller dose, but the hope will be that they also will mount better memory than we will as adults. And although they might need a booster or two, I suspect that they won't need as many boosters as adults do going forward throughout kind of, the next several years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilors. Commissioner?
May I ask a question? Let me come off camera.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for being here and giving us and updating us and giving us information. One of the questions I'm asked is about the clinical trials, doctor. So 1,500 were in the received the vaccine, I think, and 750 did not. People are asking me, is that enough of a clinical trial sampling to feel comfortable enough with what the recommendation is? So that 91%, was that sample group enough? And I hear you talking about the 20,000 that will be followed, but folks keep asking me about that initial clinical trial number and how small it was. And is that enough to give us confidence to move forward?
So it's absolutely enough to tell us that the vaccine works in that age group at that dose. So the efficacy is based on, a statistical analysis that says, yeah, it showed a big enough variation between the two groups that we can believe that. We also know the antibody responses, and they followed those as well, which were very robust and similar to what we saw, like I said, in the other kids. So we don't have reason to disbelieve the efficacy. I think the question about side effects is a reasonable one to ask. And from a medical scientific standpoint, we have no reason to think that this vaccine should behave differently than it's behaved sort of, in other age groups in terms of serious side effects. It's in particular in kids 12 to 16, although they are pubertal, and you could argue, well, that does have some difference in them. Based on the way the vaccine works, we wouldn't anticipate that we should start to see something unusual creep up. So that would be my answer, is, in our scientific knowledge of giving vaccines and knowing a lot about how they work in our bodies, there's no reason to think that we should see problems that we haven't seen in the other age groups.
Do you have a timetable of when we might know in terms of the side effects and efficacy Is there, did the clinical trials give us a timeline when we would potentially see some of these outcomes?
Well, luckily, just like with the adults, there's the VAERS reporting system. There's also another reporting system for kids that you can sign up for, and I'm blanking on the name of it, for side effects. And so as of today, my understanding is we've given 370,000 immunizations in that age group in the last 5 days. So we will know, I mean, the tracking of COVID vaccine side effects or non-side effects, just any sort of side effect, right, has been so robust and so, studied as we go along, of people reporting anything that they're seeing, that I don't think, again, that it will be long before we'll say, yeah, no, this, we're really not seeing anything unusual. I mean, think about it, almost 500,000 doses delivered in the first 5 days. And nothing so far that I just actually looked at the data set and looked at the recent, the last AEP statement today. Nobody's reporting anything that's, again, coming out. So
I think that's helpful information for us to make sure we're continuing to tell folks, because I'm assuming you are recommending vaccinations for the 5 to 11-year-olds.
Yes.
Thank you so much for your patience with me.
No worries.
Thank you, Commissioner. Dr. Wickoff and Commissioner Colton Harris, I know that Commissioner, you indicated we're not yet offering pediatric vaccination at the city clinics, but I did see the state had rolled out a plan for distribution for parents that do wish to move forward at this time with vaccination. Can either of you speak to what that looks like at the current state in the city of Springfield, where people can go?
Correct me if I'm wrong. I did hear that the Springfield Tech site was offering that age group vaccination as a public site right now. That was my understanding as of today. So that's just a public type, again, walk-in site that's open quite a bit. In terms of the pediatricians' offices, so offices are a little bit limited because of the way the vial dosage is. It's a different vial than what we give in the 12 to 18-year-olds. And since when you reconstitute it, you have to use the whole thing. The smaller pediatric offices, I suspect, won't necessarily be giving it routinely, although some of them might. There's going to be mobile clinics that come up online. There's going to be one at 50 Wasson that will be a mobile clinic that will be walk-in, as well as people can just register for that through the WorkWell app. That'll be on the Bay State page, but it should come out into the community, a QR scan code that you can do that. That'll be every Wednesday. The big health system, so our ACO, which many of the children in Springfield belong to, we will be having clinic every Thursday for vaccination, as well as one on Tuesdays and as well as one on Saturdays. So if they're in the H&E Be Healthy ACO, which is Mason Square, Caring Health Center, us, Brightwood, they should be out, they can register for vaccine that way. The school systems I know are working on how to do that. They ran into some difficulty with consents in the older age group, so they're not going to be offering the vaccine without the parent present, but I know they're working on offering it on site for vaccine clinics as well.
Commissioner, did you want to add anything to that, or does that about wrap it up? I'm sorry, you're muted, Commissioner.
No, Dr. Wickoff gave all of the information that I would have given. I also believe Eastville Mall has Pfizer as well and are giving pediatric doses as indicated. Most who are giving pediatric doses are asking parents to accompany their children, and Springfield Public Schools, again, as Dr. Wickoff said, is having, there's a gap in getting those consent back in. The parents don't have to be with the students who are currently being vaccinated, but we do need that consent form, and that's been a challenge for the staff in Springfield Public Schools. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
The CVSs and the Walgreens that immunize flu for the younger kids are doing the COVID 5 to 11 as well, which is not all the sites, but some of them.
And the final question I had, and also either of you are welcome to share any final thoughts that you think folks should know. And we do have a number of media outlets here, which I'm glad to see, to be able to get information out. So anything you think folks should know, please feel free to share. But the other question I had was with the first round of vaccine rollout, there was a lot of written material and sort of online resources we were able to point people to. Do either of you have recommendations of where we can point people for like frequently asked questions and things like that?
So well, the CDC website has a great, but if I would point them to the American Academy of Pediatrics website. They have a page that's specific for COVID information for just pediatrics. So you don't get mulled down and all the other stuff. They also keep active real-time data in terms of how many vaccines have been given, et cetera. And I think the American Academy of Pediatrics is a very trusted academy for people. And, you know, the pediatricians in the area are all members of that academy. So if you go to their website, like I said, they have a specific COVID information page for parents that gives a lot of good information.
And the Mass Department of Public Health also has some concrete information around COVID-19 boosters and pediatric doses as well. The link is very easy to find. It's really separated nicely so that you can go in and go to the link that you feel might be appropriate. And families may want the pediatric information, but they may also want the information around boosters for adults. So that's a good source as well. Those links are up on the city's website as well if individuals want to go there. I think that all of, as Dr. Witkoff said, some of the pharmacies are doing 5 to 11-year-olds, some are not. So go to their website and try to figure out which is doing that. But I said all that to say Mass Department of Public Health's website has good information and links that can be isolated.
Thank you so much, Commissioner, and thank you, Dr. Witkoff. You know, the goal of this committee throughout the pandemic has really just been to be able to, you know, spread as much information as possible and be a resource for fellow counselors and constituents to, you know, be able to get answers to the questions that we're receiving. So this has been extraordinarily helpful, and I know both Counselor Edwards and Counselor Hurst are out there regularly on the radio and in their forums as well. So this is excellent. I would ask both of you if there's any final thoughts you would like to share, and also for Counselor Hurst and Counselor Edwards, if you have any final questions, this would be the time. But for both of you, if there's anything else you'd like to share with the community, as I said, we do have a few outlets present about this particular topic. Now would be the time, and perhaps we could start with Dr. Witkoff and then finish with Commissioner Carlton Harris.
Oh, so okay, sorry, I wasn't sure we were asking the other one's questions. My final thought is one of the things I've noticed in the parents I've had conversations with, so very proactive in the practice, asking our families when they come in if they've had the opportunity to get vaccinated yet. And there is more enthusiasm around the 5 to 11 age group than there has been about the other age groups, which is interesting, you know, which I think speaks to parental instinct to try and protect your children. So I think this is a key opportunity for us to get the adults vaccinated at the same time if they have not been vaccinated today. You know, just personal stories always are nice. So today, I mean, I had a mom and she hadn't been vaccinated. She was worried about it, but she really wants her kid to get vaccinated, and she appreciates if she's going to ask her kids to get vaccinated, she needs to get vaccinated too. So I think taking those opportunities as we speak to our public about, you know, this is not only an opportunity for your kid. If you think it's important for them, it's really important for you, and trying to see if we can capture both at the same time, given our immunization rates here are not quite where we'd like them to be yet.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Doctor. Commissioner, any final thoughts?
It's probably just important for me to say that the city of Springfield during our vaccination clinics will not be doing 5 to 11 years old. The only vaccine we have right now is Moderna, and that has not been authorized for that age group. And so it's just important because we've had individuals come into the clinic and bring their children, which we redirect. So, but we will not be doing to the 5 to 11-year-olds based on vaccine availability for the Board of Health.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Commissioner, as always. And Dr. Witkoff, it's a great pleasure to meet you. I hope one day we'll be able to meet in person. But thank you to you and all the professionals at Bay State for everything you continue to do. You've been an incredible resource for the city of Springfield, and your colleagues on past meetings of ours have been very welcome guests. So please don't hesitate to reach out to us. If we can be of service to you, certainly we're available. And I know you have my email because we were conversing earlier, but I'll send you my direct contact info as well.
Yeah, and if things could come up or there's ways we can be helpful from what you're hearing from your constituents, please reach out to us. We're always happy to talk and help people make informed decisions. So great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all for attending. We will move towards adjourning this meeting at this time and reconvene 2 weeks from today. Thank you.